Tuesday afternoon. And on the following Thursday morning, leaving out other little things that happened in between, we were at 7 o'clock Mass in St. James's Church. And while the priests were giving out Holy Communion, I was with my brother-in-law Pat, Kathleen's husband here. And Pat said to me during this time when the priests were giving out Holy Communion, do you see anything in the back of the tabernacle? And when I looked up, what I could see in the back of the tabernacle was the crucified face of Jesus, which filled the back of the tabernacle in that church. Now the tabernacle at that time wasn't a very elaborate affair. It was like a bit like the old time coal box, brass coal box. And that was up there until 3 years ago. They put in a new one. But the face filled the tabernacle, and right around the edge was this light. And this light was shimmering like that. And we were both seeing the one vision or image, or call it what you like. And that lasted for some time, and then it changed. And what we could see then was, it was like the body of Jesus hanging on the cross. And we were looking at it from the right-hand side, in full size. It seemed to fit into the tabernacle. And we could see from about here down to about here. And that lasted while the priests were getting out Holy Communion, and then they put the sacred vessels back into the tabernacle and closed the door, and that was it. But that evening time, I met this American lady. I just go briefly through this now, because this is important. And I had met her the day before as well. I had been introduced to her the day before as well. And at that time, you know, there was no facilities outside. The Blessed Sacrament Church hadn't been built out in Medjugorje yet. The shops across the road and all the buildings across the road weren't there. It was just a path around the church, and the grass was around. The priests started for benches out in the grass. They still do, but there's a lot of facilities out there that wasn't there then. And I was really introduced to this particular lady. And I said to her, I met you yesterday here. And I said, who are you with? And she says, I'm with my husband, whom she called over, who was standing one side. He was a burly man, about 42 years of age, that weak in the shoulders, with a curly head. And the minute he came over and we shook hands, instantly I got this awful urge to put my arm around this man. And I said to him, do you mind, I said, if I put my arm around you? Not at all, he said, in his American accent. So I put my arm around him, and the minute I put my arm around him, he started to pray out loud. We were standing at this stage, I called it on the middle of the road, right out in front of the church. And there was a lot of people around. And he prayed away, and I left my hand around him, till eventually this urge left, and took my arm from around him. And he said to me, when you put your arm around me, he says, I got a picture of Jesus on the cross. And I started to tell him the story then that I'm about to relate to you that I had at Mass that morning. And then he said, let's sit down at a table. So I was with my sister. I don't think she's here tonight. I see her around there anyway. So the four of us sat down at one of the little plastic round tables, and we got a drink. And we started to talk to one another about where we came from, and so forth, etc., about our families. But during the discussion anyway, these people, a couple were from Florida, and they had 3 boys in family, and she mentioned that one of them was hooked on drugs. It was something, you know, not very prevalent in this part of the world at that particular time. During the course of the conversation, she felt that, you know, at this stage that he had come to terms with it, and they were both very concerned about this. I forgot to also mention about this man, his occupation was, he was a serviceman in the US Army, and had spent most of his soldiering life over in Germany, commuting back and forth to the United States. But during the course of the conversation, my sister happened to mention, you know, that we had a cousin in America, a young man, John Lennon was his name, and he died as a result of drug abuse in 1972. And he would be about 20 years of age. He was 6 foot tall, very good looking, with real blonde hair. I don't know the exact circumstances of his death, but what I do know is that his family never wanted to mention his name again. He was his name was never mentioned anymore. If he never existed, I'm sure they were so hurt, and I'm sure there's a lot of families around the world, everywhere, that would have been in the same position. But anyway, during the course of the conversation, when she mentioned about this incident of, when my sister mentioned about this incident about this cousin of ours dying as a result of drug abuse, the next thing was this weight started to build up on top of me as we sat at the table. And it started increased to such an extent that the next thing I was lying flat on the table. And what was coming to me, the message I was getting was to pray for John, pray for John, pray for John. And I was getting this picture of a fire like on a hillside, or something like what you see at the present moment out in Australia, what you see in television, the bushfires, and when it would glow and down, you know, with the breeze or whatever. And my two friends from America and my sister caught hands and they prayed away for some time. And as they prayed, this pressure, or whatever you like to call it, and the light area began to change to such an extent after some time, it lifted altogether, and I sat up and we talked, and I wasn't affected in that much. But that was my first time ever to be drawn to pray for somebody who was not on the face of this earth. And that was a bit of a shock. I didn't know whether I knew he was helped, but I didn't know whether he had gone to heaven or not as a result of our prayers. I was to find out later that he hadn't. It took a longer time than that for him to get to heaven, but he eventually is up there now.